Mycenaean Greece was the last phase of the Bronze Age in ancient Greece. It represents the first advanced civilization in mainland Greece, with its palatial states, urban organization, works of art and writing system. Among the centers of power that emerged, the most notable were those of Pylos, Tiryns, Midea in the Peloponnese, Orchomenos, Thebes, Athens in Central Greece and Iolcos in Thessaly. The most prominent site was Mycenae, in Argolid, to which the culture of this era owes its name. Mycenaean and Mycenaean influenced settlements also appeared in Epirus, Macedonia, on islands in the Aegean Sea, on the coast of Asia Minor, the Levant, Cyprus and Italy. The Mycenaean Greeks introduced several innovations in the fields of engineering, architecture and military infrastructure, while trade over vast areas of the Mediterranean was essential for the Mycenaean economy. The syllabic script, the Linear B, offers the first written records of the Greek language, and the religion already included several deities that can also be found in the Olympic pantheon. Mycenaean Greece was dominated by a warrior elite society and consisted of a network of palace-states that developed rigid hierarchical, political, social and economic systems. At the head of this society was the king, known as Wanix. Mycenaean Greece perished with the collapse of Bronze Age culture in the eastern Mediterranean, to be followed by the so-called Greek Dark Ages, a recordless transitional period leading to Archaic Greece, where significant shifts occurred from palace-centralized to decentralized forms of socio-economic organization. Various theories have been proposed for the end of this civilization, among them the Dorian invasion or activities connected to the Sea Peoples. Additional theories such as natural disasters and climatic changes have been also suggested. The Mycenaean period became the historical setting of much ancient Greek literature and mythology, including the Trojan epic cycle. Chronology. The Bronze Age in mainland Greece is generally termed as the Helladage period by modern archaeologists, after Hellas, the Greek name for Greece. This period is divided into three sub-periods. The early Helladage period was a time of prosperity with the use of metals and a growth in technology, economy and social organization. The Middle Helladage period faced a slower pace of development, as well as the evolution of Megaron-type cyst graves. Finally, the Late Helladage period roughly coincides with Mycenaean Greece. The Late Helladage period is further divided into LHI and LHII, both of which coincide with the early period of Mycenaean Greece, and LHIII, the period of expansion, decline and collapse of the Mycenaean civilization. The transition period from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age in Greece is known as sub-Mycenaean identity. The decipherment of the Mycenaean Linear B script, a writing system adapted for the use of the Greek language of the Late Bronze Age, demonstrated the continuity of Greek speech from the 2nd millennium BC into the 8th century BC, when a new script emerged. Moreover, it revealed that the bearers of Mycenaean culture were ethnically connected with the populations that resided in the Greek peninsula after the end of this cultural period. Various collective terms for the inhabitants of Mycenaean Greece were used by Homer in his 8th century BC epic, the Iliad, in reference to the Trojan War. The latter was supposed to have happened in the late 13th, early 12th century BC, when a coalition of small Greek states under the king of Mycenae besieged the walled city of Troy. Homer used the ethnonyms Achaeans, Danaans and Argives to refer to the besiegers. These names appear to have passed down from the time they were in use to the time when Homer applied them as collective terms in his Iliad. There is an isolated reference to a Kawayada in the Linear B records in Knossos, Crete, dated to c. 1400 BC, which most probably refers to a Mycenaean state on the Greek mainland. Egyptian records mention Atnj Adana land for the first time in circa 1437 BC, during the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III. This land is geographically defined in an inscription from the reign of Amenhotep III, where a number of Danaa cities are mentioned, which cover the largest part of southern mainland Greece. Among them, cities such as Mycenae, Nauplion and Thebes have been identified with certainty. Danaa has been equated with the ethnonym Danaoi, the name of the mythical dynasty that ruled in the region of Argos, also used as an ethnonym for the Greek people by Homer. In the official records of another Bronze Age empire, that of the Hittites in Anatolia, various references from c. 1400 BC to 1220 BC mention a country named Iowa. Recent scholarship, based on textual evidence, new interpretations of the Hittite inscriptions, as well as on recent surveys of archaeological evidence about Mycenaean Anatolian contacts during this period, concludes that the term Iowa must have been used in reference to the Mycenaean world, or at least to a part of it. This term may have also had broader connotations in some texts, possibly referring to all regions settled by Mycenaeans or regions under direct Mycenaean political control. Another similar ethnonym, Eqesh, in 12th century BC Egyptian inscriptions, has been commonly identified with the Iowans. These Eqesh were mentioned as a group of the Sea People. History. Shaft grave era Mycenaean civilization originated and evolved from the society and culture of the early and middle Helladage period in mainland Greece under influences from Minoan Crete. Towards the end of the Middle Bronze Age, a significant increase in the population and the number of settlements occurred. A number of centers of power emerged in southern mainland Greece, dominated by a warrior elite society, while the typical dwellings of the Tyra were an early type of Migron buildings. Some more complex structures are classified as forerunners of the later palaces. In a number of sites, defensive walls were also erected. Meanwhile, new types of burials and more imposing ones have been unearthed, which display a great variety of luxurious objects. Among the various burial types, the shaft grave became the most common form of elite burial, a feature that gave the name to the early period of Mycenaean Greece. Among the Mycenaean elite, deceased males were usually laid to rest in gold masks and funerary armor, and females in gold crowns and clothes gleaming with gold ornaments. The royal shaft graves next to the Acropolis of Mycenae, in particular the grave circles and B, signified the elevation of a native Greek-speaking royal dynasty whose economic power depended on long-distance sea trade. During this period, the Mycenaean centers witnessed increased contacts with the outside world, and especially with the Cyclades and the Minoan centers in the island of Crete. Mycenaean presence appears to be also depicted in a fresco at Akrotiri, on Thera Island, which possibly displays many warriors in boar's dusk helmets, a feature typical of Mycenaean warfare. In the early 15th century, commerce intensified, with Mycenaean pottery reaching the western coast of Asia Minor, including Miletus and Troy, Cyprus, Lebanon, Palestine and Egypt. At the end of the shaft grave era, a new and more imposing type of elite burial emerged, the tholos, large circular burial chambers with high vaulted roofs and a straight entry passage lined with stone. Con era, the eruption of Thera, which according to archaeological data occurred in c. 1500 BC, resulted in the decline of the Minoan civilization of Crete. This turn of events gave the opportunity to the Mycenaeans to spread their influence throughout the Aegean. Around c. 1450 BC, they were in control of Crete itself, including Knossos, and colonized several other Aegean islands, reaching as far as Rhodes. Thus the Mycenaeans became the dominant power of the region, period marking the beginning of the Mycenaean era, a highly uniform culture that spread in mainland Greece and the Aegean. From the early 14th century BC, Mycenaean trade began to take advantage of the new trading opportunities in the Mediterranean after the Minoan collapse. The trade routes were expanded further, reaching Cyprus, Amman in the Near East, Apulia in Italy, and Spain. At the time, the Palace of Knossos yielded the earliest records of the Greek Linear B script, based on the previous Linear A of the Minoans. The use of the new script spread in mainland Greece and offers valuable insight of the administrative network of the palatial centers. However, the unearthed records are too fragmentary for a political reconstruction of Bronze Age Greece. Excavations at Miletus, southwest Asia Minor, indicate the existence of a Mycenaean settlement there already from c. 1450 BC, replacing the previous Minoan installations. This site became a sizable and prosperous Mycenaean center until the 12th century BC. Apart from the archaeological evidence, this is also attested in Hittite records, which indicate that Miletus was the most important base for Mycenaean activity in Asia Minor. Mycenaean presence also reached the adjacent sites of Isus and Ephesus. Meanwhile, imposing palaces were built in the main Mycenaean centers of the mainland. The earliest palace structures were Megaron-type buildings, such as the Menelaon in Sparta, Laconia. Palaces proper are datable from c. 1400 BC, when Cyclopean fortifications were erected at Mycenae and nearby Tiryns. Additional palaces were built in Midea and Pylos in Peloponnese, Athens, Eleusis, Thebes and Orchomenos in Central Greece and Iolcos in Thessaly, the latter being the northernmost Mycenaean center. Knossos in Crete became also a Mycenaean center, where the former Minoan complex underwent a number of adjustments, including the addition of a throne room. These centers were based on a rigid network of bureaucracy where administrative competencies were classified into various sections and offices, according to specialization of work and trades. At the head of this society was the king, known as Wanax in Mycenaean Greek terms. All powers were vested in him, as the main landlord and spiritual and military leader. At the same time he was an entrepreneur and trader and was aided by a network of high officials. Involvement in Asia Minor. The presence of VIAF in western Anatolia is mentioned in various Hittite accounts from c. 1400 to c. 1220 BC. Iawar is generally accepted as a Hittite translation of Mycenaean Greece, but a precise geographical definition of the term cannot be drawn from the texts. During this time, the kings of Iawar were evidently capable of dealing with the Hittite counterparts both on a diplomatic and military level. Moreover, Iawar activity was to interfere in Anatolian affairs, with the support of anti-Hittite uprisings through local vassal rulers, which the Iawar king used as agents for the extension of his influence. In c. 1400 BC, Hittite records mention the military activities of an Iawar warlord, Atarsia, a possible Hittite way of writing the Greek name Atreus, who attacked Hittite vassals in western Anatolia. Later, in c. 1315 BC, an anti-Hittite rebellion headed by Arzawa, a Hittite vassal state, received support from Iawar. Meanwhile, Iawar appears to be in control of a number of islands in the Aegean, an impression also supported by archaeological evidence. During the reign of the Hittite king Hattusili III, the king of Iawar is recognized as a great king, and of equal status with the other contemporary Great Bronze Age rulers, the kings of Egypt, Babylonia and Assyria. At the time, another anti-Hittite movement led by Pyarma-Radu's broke out and was supported by the king of Iowa. Pyarma-Radu caused major unrest in the region of Wilusa and later invaded the island of Lesbos, which then passed into Iowan control. The Hittite-Iowan confrontation in Wilusa, the Hittite name for Troy, may provide the historical foundation for the Trojan War tradition. As a result of this instability, the Hittite king initiated correspondence in order to convince his Iowan counterpart to restore peace in the region. The Hittite record mentions a certain Tawegalawa, a possible Hittite translation for Greek Eteocles, as brother of the king of Iowa. Collapse, initial decline and revival in c. 1250 BC. The first wave of destruction apparently occurred in various centers of mainland Greece for reasons that cannot be identified by archaeologists. In Boeotia, Thebes was burned to the ground. Around that year is slightly later. Nearby, Orchomenos shared the same fate, while the Boeotian fortifications of Gla were deserted. In the Peloponnese, a number of buildings surrounding the citadel of Mycenae were attacked and burned. These incidents appear to have prompted the massive strengthening and expansion of the fortifications in various sites. In some cases, arrangements were also made for the creation of subterranean passages which led to underground systems. Tiryns, Midea and Athens expanded their defenses with new Cyclopean-style walls. The extension program in Mycenae almost doubled the fortified area of the citadel. To this phase of extension belongs the impressive Lion Gate, the main entrance into the Mycenaean Acropolis. It appears that after this first wave of destruction, a short-lived revival of Mycenaean culture followed. Mycenaean Greece continues to be mentioned in international affairs, particularly in Hittite records. In c. 1220 BC, the king of Iowa is again reported to have been involved in an anti-Hittite uprising in western Anatolia. Another contemporary Hittite account reports that Iowan ships should avoid Assyrian-controlled harbors, as part of a trade embargo imposed on Assyria. In general, in the second half of 13th century BC, trade was in decline in the eastern Mediterranean, most probably due to the unstable political environment there. Final collapse. None of the defense measures appear to have prevented the final destruction and collapse of the Mycenaean states. A second destruction struck Mycenae in California. 1190 BC is shortly thereafter. This event marked the end of Mycenae as a major power. The site was then reoccupied, but on a smaller scale. The palace of Pylos, in the southwestern Peloponnese, faced destruction in c. 1180 BC. The Linear B archives found there, preserved by the heat of the fire that destroyed the palace, mention hasty defense preparations due to an imminent attack without giving any detail about the attacking force. As a result of this turmoil, specific regions in mainland Greece witnessed a dramatic population decrease, especially Boeotia, Argolid and Messenia. Mycenaean refugees migrated to Cyprus and the Levantine coast. Nevertheless, other regions on the edge of the Mycenaean world prospered, such as the Ionian Islands, the northwestern Peloponnese, parts of Attica and a number of Aegean islands. The Acropolis of Athens, oddly, appears to have avoided destruction. Hypotheses for the collapse. The reasons for the end of the Mycenaean culture have been hotly debated among scholars. At present, there is no satisfactory explanation for the collapse of the Mycenaean palace systems. The two most common theories are population movement and internal conflict. The first attributes the destruction of Mycenaean sites to invaders. The hypothesis of a Dorian invasion, known as such in ancient Greek tradition, that led to the end of Mycenaean Greece, is supported by sporadic archaeological evidence such as new types of burials, in particular cist graves, and the use of a new dialect of Greek, the Doric one. It appears that the Dorians moved southward gradually over a number of years and devastated the territory, until they managed to establish themselves in the Mycenaean centers. A new type of ceramic also appeared, called barbarian ware, because it was attributed to invaders from the north. On the other hand, the collapse of Mycenaean Greece coincides with the activity of the Sea Peoples in the eastern Mediterranean. They caused widespread destruction in Anatolia and the Levant and were finally defeated by Pharaoh Ramesses III in c. 1175 BC. One of the ethnic groups that comprised these people were the Iqash, a name that appears to be linked with the Iawa of the Hittite inscriptions. Alternative scenarios propose that the fall of Mycenaean Greece was a result of internal disturbances which led to internecine warfare among the Mycenaean states, a civil unrest in a number of states, as a result of the strict hierarchical social system and the ideology of the Waniks. In general, due to the obscure archaeological picture in 12th–11th century BC Greece, there is a continuing controversy among scholars over whether the impoverished societies that succeeded the Mycenaean palatial states were newcomers of populations that already resided in Mycenaean Greece. Recent archaeological findings tend to favor the latter scenario. Additional theories concerning natural factors, such as climate change, droughts or earthquakes, have also been proposed. The period following the end of Mycenaean Greece, c. 1100 to 800 BC, is generally termed the Greek Dark Ages. Political organization. Palatial states. Mycenaean palatial states, or centrally organized palace operating polities, are recorded in ancient Greek literature and mythology and confirmed by discoveries made by modern archaeologists such as Heinrich Schliemann. Each Mycenaean kingdom was governed from the palace, which exercised control over most, if not all, industries within its realm. The palatial territory was divided into several sub-regions, each headed by its provincial center. Each province was further divided in smaller districts, the Damo. A number of palaces and fortifications appear to be part of a wider kingdom. For instance, Gla, located in the region of Boeotia, belonged to the state of nearby Orchomenos. Moreover, the Palace of Mycenae appeared to have ruled over a territory 2 to 3 times the size of the other palatial states in Bronze Age Greece. Its territory would have also included adjacent centers, including Tiryns and Nauplion, which could plausibly be ruled by a member of Mycenae's ruling dynasty. The unearthed Linear B texts are too fragmentary for the reconstruction of the political landscape in Mycenaean Greece, and they do not support the existence of a larger Mycenaean state. On the other hand, contemporary Hittite and Egyptian records suggest the presence of a single state under a great king. Alternatively, based on archaeological data, some sort of confederation among a number of palatial states appears to be possible. If some kind of united political entity existed, the dominant center was probably located in Thebes or in Mycenae, with the latter state being the most probable center of power, society and administration. The Neolithic agrarian village constituted the foundation of Bronze Age political culture in Greece. The vast majority of the preserved Linear B records deal with administrative issues and give the impression that Mycenaean palatial administration was highly uniform, with the use of the same language, terminology, system of taxation and distribution. Considering this sense of uniformity, the Pylos archive, which is the best preserved one in the Mycenaean world, is generally taken as a representative one. The state was ruled by a king, the Waniks, whose role was religious and perhaps also military and judicial. The Waniks oversaw virtually all aspects of palatial life, from religious feasting and offerings to the distribution of goods, craftsmen and troops. Under him was the Logitas, whose role appears mainly religious. His activities possibly overlap with the Waniks and is usually seen as the second in command. Both Waniks and Logitas were at the head of a military aristocracy known as the Achaeta. The land possessed by the Waniks is usually the Temenos. There is also at least one instance of a person, Enkiawan, at Pylos, who appears titleless in the written record but whom modern scholars regard as probably a king. A number of local officials positioned by the Waniks appear to be in charge of the districts, such as Korite, Porokorite and the Darmokoro, the latter probably being appointed to take charge of the commune. A council of elders was chaired, the Kairosia, the Basileus, who in later Greek society was the name of the king, refers to communal officials. In general, Mycenaean society appears to have been divided into two groups of free men: the king's entourage, who conducted administrative duties at the palace, and the people. These last were watched over by royal agents and were obliged to perform duties for and pay taxes to the palace. Among those who could be found in the palace were well-to-do high officials, who probably lived in the vast residences found in proximity to Mycenaean palaces, but also others, tied by their work to the palace and not necessarily better off than the members of the Damo, such as craftsmen, farmers, and perhaps merchants. Occupying a lower rung of the social ladder were the slaves, douiro. These are recorded in the texts as working either for the palace or for specific deities.